Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Buchanan. We're here for another edition of Secrets from the ERISA Vault. Inside information about how ERISA benefits work. If you have an insurance policy through work or you have other employee benefits, they fall under a federal law called ERISA, the Employee Retirement and Income Security Act of 1974. It applies to probably the majority of Americans' health insurance. It applies to a whole lot of people's long-term disability insurance and other benefits. And today we're going to talk about the complicated issue that people tend to not understand of how to calculate what someone's long-term disability benefits are going to be. If you become disabled and you have to rely on your company long-term disability policy, how much money can you expect to get? That's an important thing that people should know and people should understand. And it gets a little complicated, and people are surprised by some of the special rules that are involved in those calculations. So today we're going to talk about calculating long-term disability benefits under typical ERISA benefits policies. When people become disabled and they apply through their company, the long-term disability policy is probably not something they've looked at closely. Looking at the details of that policy is not something that most people do until they actually have a problem. But they have a medical problem, they get sick, they get injured. So for some reason, physically or mentally, they can't work anymore, or they can't work as much as they used to. So they go to the employer and say, hey, I'd like to apply for long-term disability. You're counting on those benefits to make up the difference when you can't work anymore and you can't make money from your employer. Well, what's some of the things people need to know? Well, one of the things you want to look at is, what does the policy say the benefit amount should be? Most long-term disability policies offered through work, and I would say at least somewhere around 90% of them, the basic math is they will offer 60% of what you were making before you became disabled. So the long-term disability policy says 60% of your pre-disability earnings. But it gets a little more complicated than that. What counts as pre-disability earnings? A lot of policies don't count overtime pay. A lot of policies don't count certain bonuses. They don't count certain other income that for a lot of employees is a part of their pay. I've seen employees that work at banks that get some kind of a commission for bringing in new accounts, and the commission doesn't count toward their pay for the calculation of benefits. Truck drivers who get paid by the mile and have deductions if they own the vehicle or something like that, often it doesn't make any sense in the policy to calculate their pay because the policy doesn't cover their actual take-home pay. It covers their net pay after all these deductions, but the deductions are done on paper in truck driving cases. We might also see clients who work in a sales-oriented job, and there's some kind of, again, a commission, sort of like what I talked about a second ago. And how the commissions are counted is a very complicated matter, and you just have to look at each policy. The one that surprises a lot of people is, well, I was making $75,000 a year at this job that paid $30 an hour. Well, it's the benefits that you get are going to be based on the $30 an hour for the first 40 hours often, and that's a little over $60,000. That's not $75,000 like you actually got paid because you worked a lot of overtime. So that's issue number one. What's the base pay? The other issue, can that percentage be changed? Well, a lot of policies, it cannot. A whole lot of policies, it's just going to be 60% of your earnings. There are some policies out there, however, that will allow you to purchase an additional amount of benefits. There's a common policy that's issued by, I think Hartford does it, and I've seen a few other companies that do it, where their base benefit is only 50%, but you can pay extra and get it all the way up to 65% or even 70%. My recommendation is, if you are happen to listen to this before you become disabled, go out and pay the extra money to get the higher benefit, because the way the math is going to work out, that is a significant improvement. That gets you a much higher benefit, more than you think it does. And if you listen to the rest of this podcast, we'll go through why that really matters in terms of some of the offsets and stuff. So the basic question you need to know is, what does the policy actually pay? So 60%, let's use the example of somebody making right around $60,000 a year. Well, that's $5,000 a month. 60% of $5,000 is $3,000. So their policy is going to pay $3,000 a month. However, here's the next thing that catches people out, and then they don't understand how this works. Many policies offset for other benefits, and I would say almost all policies offset for some kind of other benefits. The most common situation we run into is somebody who's also become disabled enough that they apply for Social Security disability. They win their Social Security disability case, and the long-term disability company has written in the policy that they are allowed to offset for the benefits that you get from Social Security disability. So let's go back to the same person making $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month times 0.6 or 60%. Their long-term disability is $3,000 a month. If their Social Security is $1,800 a month, then the LTD company is only going to pay $1,200 a month once the person starts getting their Social Security. They only pay the difference because they're allowed to subtract from what the person gets in Social Security. Here's where it gets even worse. Almost all long-term disability policies don't just offset for what you, the individual, gets in Social Security benefits, but they offset for the family benefits. And family benefits are what in the Social Security world they call auxiliary benefits, but in the everyday English, it's the dependence benefits. It's the benefits that you would get if you become disabled, start drawing your Social Security, and you have any kids that are under 18 that are dependent on you, that either live with you or that you pay child support on, that you're the parent of, then you also get a benefit for that child, or in many cases, the child gets a check or a payment for that child. The total payment for all your dependents is round numbers about half again of what you're getting. There's a maximum that applies when you get to a certain level of benefits. But for easy math, the example I would give is you make $60,000 a year, $5,000 a month. 60% of that is $3,000. Your own individual Social Security benefit is $1,800, and your auxiliary or family benefits, also called dependence benefits. Those are all words used by different people talking about the same concept here, that Social Security will pay all of your dependents a total of around $900 in the example that I'm giving. Well, that means your family altogether is getting $2,700. And if the long-term disability company is only going to pay $3,000, that means your long-term disability policy is only worth $300. Now, what happens when the youngest kid turns 18, then Social Security will stop paying benefits for your auxiliary benefits or the dependents benefits. And there's some special rules that apply if the child is still in high school. But in most cases, the benefits stop when they turn 18. When the youngest kid turns 18, then you still get your $1,800 a month, but the long-term disability company stops offsetting for the children's benefits that are no longer being paid. These called family benefits in the insurance policy. Social Security calls them auxiliary benefits. We would call them also dependence benefits. When those stop, now all of a sudden your long-term disability policy is worth $1,200 again per month. So it's worth fighting for that long-term disability policy and appealing it, because when the youngest kid turns 18, you're going to get back to $1,200 a month from long-term disability, and that can be worthwhile. That can make a difference in your family life. Even $300 a month makes a difference, but you'd much rather get that full $1,200 a month once your kids turn 18. Another factor to the offset of Social Security is most policies don't offset for the amount that Social Security increases each year. So Social Security has a cost of living increase. It will go up, say, 2% or 5%. Whatever, how bad inflation has been, the Department of Labor puts out a certain consumer price index that Social Security is tied to. And when those benefits go up each year, your long-term disability does not offset for the increase. So if you were getting the $1,200 a month as your difference, and your Social Security goes from $1,800 to, say, $1,875, you still get the full $1,200 from the long-term disability company as long as they continue to pay you and find you disabled. However, there's other offsets. If you have a workers' comp injury, that can also be an offset. And we'll do a separate podcast on that down the road. But the big takeaway there is, if you settle your workers' comp case, you need to have your lawyer put in the order that settlement is to be considered to be spread out over your lifetime or spread out over as long as possible. Because if it's spread out over a short period of time, the long-term disability company will offset for the highest number that they can reasonably calculate for your workers' comp settlement, and it may take away all your long-term disability benefits. There are other benefits that you can get from other places that might also be an offset. Normally, long-term disability policies don't offset for individual disability policies. So that's usually something you're okay with, but you still need to read the policy to make sure. One that surprises our clients a lot is they might be eligible for some kind of a company pension. And if they draw that pension early while they're still under retirement age because they don't have the money, they've become disabled, their long-term disability maybe is not paying them and they're having to appeal that. So they go ahead and apply for the company pension, and then later they win their long-term disability, and guess what happens? The pension is another offset, so the long-term disability company now doesn't have to pay the benefits that they should have paid in the first place because you started taking a pension. So if you find yourself in this situation, talk to your attorney. If you're one of our clients, talk to us if we take your case on about all these offsets, the workers' compensation and how it should work, the long-term disability versus Social Security offset, and the pension benefit or any other benefit where you get money from your employer. Those are all things that you need to talk to your attorney about to find out exactly how they're going to offset, but they could take away a big chunk of your long-term disability benefits. One of the other things that happens in long-term disability cases is, let's say you're paid long-term disability for a couple of years, and they pay you the full $3,000 a month in my example that I've been giving, and you haven't won your Social Security case yet. What happens when you finally do win your Social Security case? Well, the Social Security pays you $1,800 a month in back pay back to the point where their benefits start, and maybe $900 a month for your kids' benefits. And these are obviously just examples, as I said. It could be everybody almost has a different amount, but I'm using round numbers just to make it easy to give this as an example. So all of a sudden, you owe the insurance company back $2,700 for every month that you got back pay from Social Security, where you had previously received $3,000. Now you were supposed to only have gotten $300. You got to send the insurance company back all of your Social Security money. There's a couple rules with that. One is that if you hire an attorney for your Social Security case, most insurance companies won't offset for the amount you paid your Social Security attorney, which is as much as $10,000. It's limited to 25%, except under some special rules, it could even be higher. But the point is, whatever amount is approved by the Social Security Administration for your fee for the Social Security case to pay you, that attorney should not be included in the amount you get from Social Security in terms of calculating how much you have to pay back the insurance company. But some insurance companies will try to collect it all until your attorney is able to fight the insurance company and get that cleared up to make sure the insurance company is not trying to collect too much. One of the other special rules is, if you do have to pay them back, often the insurance company will say, you pay us back or we're going to take further legal action. Or they might simply say, we're just not going to pay your ongoing benefits. Well, if you're old enough and close enough to when the benefits would end, or the insurance company said you're not disabled and it's a final decision that they're not going to appeal anymore, you might be better off just letting them keep the rest of what they owe you, and you end up keeping more from your Social Security money. And there's a way to do that. And once again, that's something I would talk to an attorney about. However, if you're going to be disabled for a long time and you're going to eventually get more benefits, you need to be prepared to figure out how much do I have to pay back to the long-term disability company in order to keep getting my benefits, and how is that going to work so I get the best amount of the best payment of my benefits, the best calculation. These get a little complicated, and that's another reason to talk to an attorney. But the essence of it is, if you're counting on enough money down the road from your long-term disability, maybe the best idea is to pay them back. There's lots and lots of variation in this when it gets into the depths of the policy. But the important thing to take away from your understanding is, the basic math is the insurance company gets to subtract from the 60% number that your long-term disability benefit is, whatever you get from Social Security, in most cases. One question people usually ask me if I'm talking to people at a meeting with a prospective client or talking to other attorneys, well, then why apply for Social Security at all? Well, the answer in some cases is you have to. The long-term disability policy says you have to. And if you don't apply for Social Security and appeal through a certain level, either going through to a Social Security judge or even to something called the Appeals Council, which is the fourth step of the Social Security process, the judge is usually the third step. Below that, by the way, it's the reconsideration step is the second step, and the first step is the initial application for Social Security. If you don't go through at least 3 or 4 steps, whatever the policy says, the insurance company is allowed to offset for the amount you could have gotten from Social Security. So you might as well apply. The other part you get from Social Security is, like I mentioned earlier, when the Social Security benefits go up each year under the cost of living increase, most insurance companies don't offset for that. They have it either in the policy or in their claims manual, so they're not going to offset for those increased benefits. Another reason to get Social Security benefits going is that you also get Medicare 2 years after the date of that your first check goes back to. So the date the Social Security decides they first owe you a check for, it's called the date of entitlement under the Social Security rules. 24 months later, you get Medicare benefits if you're on Social Security. So that can make a difference in your life where you don't have to rely on your old company health insurance, or you don't have to rely on getting Obamacare, Affordable Care Act health insurance. You don't have to try to find some other way to get your health insurance if you're on Medicare. If you have some other kind of insurance plus Medicare, that's even better. But at least it gives you that option of having Medicare. So applying for Social Security gets you the Medicare, gets you a little bit of increased benefits each year. And it's also a backup if the long-term disability company ever cuts you off. At least you have the Social Security going on. So it's worthwhile in most cases to pursue both Social Security and long-term disability, especially if the long-term disability company says we're going to make you do it and we're going to count that as an offset if you don't apply for Social Security. So you should probably, in most cases, pursue both. So that's the basics of how this works. And I can give some other examples. If you have somebody who's making a lot more money, say $120,000 a year, then each month they get $10,000 a month in income. 60% of that is $6,000 a month. Well, that's well above the maximum amount of Social Security. And so their long-term disability might still be worth $2,000 a month, even if they're getting benefits for them and their kids. So it's important to look at what the actual math is in your case to determine how much your long-term disability is going to be even after you get Social Security benefits. It's worthwhile in most cases, if you're not able to work anymore, pursuing both. There's also some special rules. There's other programs under Social Security called supplemental security income for people that are poor enough. People who work and earn enough money to make and to also work at a company that has long-term disability are often not covered by SSI in the Social Security world, but occasionally we run into somebody who is. And so that's something an attorney can help you point you in the right direction on how all that works. So this is a basic overview of how Social Security benefits interplay with long-term disability, but other benefits like workers' compensation, other benefits like a pension benefit, all of those are often under your policy an offset that reduces the amount the company owes you for long-term disability benefits. It's something you should talk to your attorney about when you hire one to help you with long-term disabilities, to make sure that they know about all the other either offsets you're currently getting or that you're applying for, that you have the option to apply for, so you can actually figure out how that math works and figure out what's best for you in your case. At Eric Buchanan Associates, we help people with these kind of issues all the time. We don't handle Social Security cases, but we work closely with attorneys who do, and we have one who's of counsel in our office if it's a local case. But we also work with other attorneys around the country who understand how Social Security works. We used to handle Social Security, but we got so focused on doing long-term disability that this is really what we focus on now, all over the country, all over the United States. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to Eric Buchanan Associates at buchanandisability.com. Tell them you've heard my podcast, and then reach out to me or through our website to ask these questions that are follow-up, and I'll be glad to address those in future podcasts. One thing I'll say is I need to be clear. Unless you are currently a client of ours that has signed a contract, anything that we say is not legal advice, and you can't rely on anything we say on this podcast as legal advice. If you are a current client, I don't know which one of you out there might be listening to this, so don't consider this legal advice for your particular case. We need to talk about what's going on in your particular case to figure out how the facts would actually apply. So if you have any questions about any of that, whether you're a current client or someone who's thinking you need help, please reach out to us at buchanandisability.com to see how much we can help you understand how long-term disability works, and if you've been denied long-term disability, to get you the benefits that you deserve.